stories of the Musqueam, Slave and Squamish peoples. We're very happy to be here in Chinatown today. Since 2013, this is the 80th anniversary of the Japanese-Canadian internment, and also this is the 100th anniversary of the Chinese head tax. Many of Canada's history has been about exclusion, including Asian Canadian writers whose histories and stories have been shaped by the erosion of their history. So first of all, I'd like to thank our volunteer team as well as Sophie Monk, who is our festival coordinator, and Sally, as well as the festival team and all the ACWW board members. I'd also like to thank our partners and sponsors, the BC Arts Council, the Canada Council, the City of Vancouver, Word Vancouver Literary Festival, the Chinatown Storytelling Center, Dr. Sun Yat-sen Classical Garden, Center A Gallery, the PCHC Museum of Migration, Rice Paper Magazine, Vancouver Asian Heritage Month Society, Iron Dog Bookstore, and the Asian Literature Circle. And before we begin our program, I'd like to invite Pat Caruno, who is a founding member of the Asian Literature Circle and the president of the Pacific Canada Heritage Center Museum of Migration Society, to give a few words on the history of our Literature Circle as well as a message from PCHC. So Pat.
Thank you, Ada. And happy Mother's Day, everybody. Thank you. And happy Asian Heritage Month. So this is part of why we celebrate LiterASIAN this month, because of Asian Heritage Month. So I'm representing Pacific Canada Heritage Center. We're one of the co-partners for this event today. Our book club, Ada and I were co-founders of the Asian Literature Circle, but we're happy to invite and have everybody here today. Thank you. With my PCHC hat on, I'm going to shorten Pacific Canada Heritage Center Museum of Migration Society to PCHC. And thank you, Winnie. Winnie is the co-founder, she's been president, executive director, mentor to all of us at PCHC. Also community mentor and activist. So this is an event that Winnie is co-chair of the Hearts of Freedom. That's one of our current events happening with PCHC. I'd just like to mention that Pacific Canada Heritage Center is a nonprofit society, and we strive to gather stories of everybody represented in Pacific Canada, First Nations, all settlers that have come, people who have lived here, who have died here, passed through here, and we do gather stories, and they're on our website. We don't have that many. We feel that it's really important to collect everybody's story, especially the silenced, the marginalized, the often ignored stories. So this Hearts of Freedom celebrates or recognizes the history of the Laotian, Cambodian, and Vietnamese people, refugees, who came between 1975 to 1985 to Canada. And that was a landmark event. If you want to learn more, please come to the UBC Robson Square, where the exhibition currently is. It's panels, QR codes, and there is also a great film called Passage to Freedom, very powerful about this chapter of our history. And it also includes the people, the government sponsors, and also the private sponsors and politicians who were involved at that period of our history. So do consider coming to Hearts of Freedom. It will be, the next event will be on June 4th, and it will be at the RH, the Alumni Center at the UBC campus, where you will be having the opportunity to view the film.
Yes.
And it is all free because of the volunteers.
Yes.
So thank you, Winnie, for all your work to bring this Hearts of Freedom to us. And Our goal is it's going to be traveling also to other parts of British Columbia with this QR code. Maybe we'll leave this poster over at the table. You can find out when the future events are. So it's like I was a teacher, so sometimes I'm just like one step ahead of the class. But sometimes we feel like we're not really here. So that's a little bit about Pacific Canada Heritage Centre. And for the history of this book club, when I was a kid, I was exposed to some Asian literature written in English through my mom. I don't know if you know these authors. Pearl S. Buck, Lin Yu Tang, Han Su-yin. So that was kind of my introduction. But of course, I couldn't read these books. I couldn't read. So during my childhood, I was not aware that there were any children's books or aware of any young adult books that had Chinese or Asian characters. And I didn't consider this to be a problem because I just didn't know what I didn't know. Our reading circle is indebted to Yvonne Brown. Oh, thank you so much.
They will talk seamlessly for 10 minutes each, and then they'll have another 10 minutes to interact with each other or to continue with whatever discussion they like. So first of all, we're going to hear from Winnie Cheung. Winnie loved reading and writing as a child and dreamed of becoming a writer. She dabbled in different kinds of writing in both English and Chinese, and even had some success of having a few books published before immigrating to Canada. As an immigrant, a mother and career woman, she had no spare time for herself. After working over 20 years at UBC, she took early retirement to restart her interrupted writing career. However, as she has been busy bringing out other people's books and giving voices to the voiceless, she still hasn't yet started to write her own story. We're waiting, Winnie. But Winnie has won 2 awards in 2020, the Lieutenant Governor's Medal for historical writing in the book Chinatown Through a Wide Lens, Photographs of Future Chow. And also, there was a book commissioned by the BC government as a legacy project associated with the official policy by the government of BC called Celebration Chinese Canadian Legacies in British Columbia, and that was written in 2018. So our second speaker is Sharon Lee, and Sharon is Sansei, a third-generation Japanese Canadian, born and raised in Toronto with her 2 sisters by her parents, both Nisei, second-generation Japanese Canadian. She lives with her husband Peter, who is here. Peter, if you want to. Who is a third-generation Chinese Canadian, and they have 3 adult children. On a professional note, Sharon attended the University of Toronto, graduating with a degree in pharmacy. The first half of her career was in hospital pharmacy, followed by a change to a teaching career at Humber College. She retired during the pandemic, intending to relax and enjoy life. However, never one to sit still, she found new interests to pursue, including chronicling her father's anecdotes from his youth. And she's here today to share her father's memoirs, Growing Up Nisei, Boyhood Tales of a Japanese Canadian. And our third speaker is Hieu Pham-Fraser. Hieu has worked as an educator for over 27 years. She is currently the district principal supporting schools in the areas of equity, diversity, and inclusion in the Metro Vancouver area. Hieu wrote this book because she saw a need for our society to understand that name is identity. After watching her students change or anglicize their names to better fit in, Hieu decided to share her story. This book is enjoyed by many children aged 2 to 15 to 18, especially for children of Asian descent, as they can see themselves The lessons go much deeper for many adults as the themes of microaggressions, structural racism, and implicit bias can be reflected on after reading this book. Hieu hopes that the little girl helps us all think how we ourselves and can help welcome others who don't look like us, speak like us, or have the same culture and histories as we do. So we're going to start first.
A livelihood, not in the village. So unfortunately, more atrocious things were happening, so they had to run. And eventually, her father, being very, very resourceful, found a way to bring everybody to Macau. So they smuggled themselves in little boats at night to Macau, and via Macau to Hong Kong, where they had families, so they settled in Hong Kong. Unfortunately, a few years later, Hong Kong was invaded and was occupied. So this time, they were staying there, but the food supply was cut off. And Hong Kong could not produce enough food for, even then, at that time, it's a small population. So they had to run again. And so there were this exodus. People just walk along the main road called Nathan Road and then Tai Po Road, leading all the way north to Canton. So for days, people were walking up like that because you either starve to death or you try your luck back in China. So eventually they arrived in Canton, and there's still starvation. And so a lot of the families found themselves either selling their children or just giving them away. So my grandparents gave away the oldest two girls, hoping that they would have a chance to survive. And my mother was so hungry for days on end that she could not move. She was staying in bed. Then some relatives from another province happened to be visiting and checked on them. And my mother's still thinking very clearly. She said, instead of starving here, I should now get my mother to give me away. So she asked and begged to be taken away by these relatives. So the relatives took pity on her, and the mother, of course, didn't want to give her away if she was already given two. So gave my mother away. My mother went then to the next province on the west, it's Guangxi. So it's been quite a journey for her already. That was the first night. They had to spend the night in a hotel to take the boat up the river to Guangxi province. And she was saying in this chapter how all these young people with their aunt, they were so happy, they were singing, and they put her in the hotel room and ordered in some food for her because she's just too weak to move. And when she saw the bowl of rice, that was her reaction, because she was thinking about her starving family members.
Ration. I thought that was pretty good. So, having moved forward from that, the book, it has my father's name on it. They are his stories and anecdotes shared with us. And it really started out as a very simple pandemic project, but it took a life of its own. And I wonder, Sophie, is it possible to show the video? I have a short video here with my father reading one of the chapters, and I'd just like to introduce him first, since he couldn't travel with us to be here.
Tell us about your father while we wait.
I will. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about how this whole pandemic project got started. When the pandemic was declared, early 2020, as across Canada and around the world, we were locked down. We stayed at home, we worked from home, and we didn't venture outside. So for my father, who was 94 years old at the time, this meant he was no longer able to get out to the senior center to play cards. He couldn't join his friends at the Japanese Canadian Cultural Center, and he was really very isolated. As the weeks passed, we tried to visit him at home, at his home, and that's where I grew up, and visit through the front window using our phones. But I could see in his eyes how he longed to have us come in and just give us great big hugs. And it was really difficult for all of us. He was not one to chat on the phone. A phone conversation might go, "Hi Dad, how are you doing today?" "Fine." And then a long pause. Mostly I would fill in with what I was doing, which was not much since we were locked down as well. So looking to technology, we were able to set him up with an iPad, and I planned FaceTime chats with him. I thought maybe this would keep him connected to me and without being physically there with him. So then the dilemma was what to talk about. Well, thinking back, there were stories that he always regaled us with from the time we were kids, and he eagerly repeated them to his grandchildren about his exploits and adventures here in Vancouver during the Depression, and then during World War II, the Canadian government sent the Japanese Canadians living on the west coast of Canada to internment camps as they were labeled as enemy aliens. So these were stories that I always felt should be captured, but they're stories that Dad just told everybody, so you kind of forget, these are just family stories. But the pandemic offered me a golden opportunity. We would connect once a week on FaceTime. I could see his forehead and the ceiling. The angle of the iPad was wrong, but adjusting it was going to be too much work. So I sat on my laptop and prompted him with many a, "Tell me the time," or "Tell me the story about." And off he would begin to tell his story, and I would frantically type it into a Word document. So page after page of stories emerged. Now I had to decide what to do with them all. At this point, I thought if I could organize them, because they were just random stories here and there, organize them into chronological order as my scientific mind set forth. Maybe I could edit the document a little bit, run it over to Staples, print it, Sherlock bind it, and share it with my sisters and his grandchildren. We'd have a snapshot of his youth and the stories that we all knew bits and pieces of. So I spoke to my brother-in-law, Rob Hieu, who himself is an author and novelist, about next steps. He said, "Sure, send me the document." Off it went to him, and I think we both forgot about it. So we now fast forward to the spring of 2022. We had a sudden scare that really jump-started the book. My father suffered a stroke, and Rob called frantically to say, "We really should work on those stories." So he reviewed all that I had captured and suggested that there might be enough material there to publish it as a book. Over the next several months, Rob helped me see that rather than using a simple chronological order, we could create chapters, and in doing that would flow into an evolving memoir. As we created each chapter, Rob felt that photos would add a poignant and a human touch. We scrounged through old albums, searched through old documents, and asked relatives for help, and the book began to take shape. But it started out as a simple way to connect with my father during the pandemic. It grew roots. It became a book of his anecdotes and memories growing up in those challenging times. It was published a week after he was discharged from hospital. And I really am so grateful to everybody who helped me put them together and help preserve these memories. With a very special thanks to my brother-in-law, Rob, who had the vision to say we could make a book. So when my father first read the book, he was still reeling from the effects of the stroke. he'd read a chapter and he'd comment, I know this story. So is this ready to go or?
A farmer store. They had a 99-cent day sale where you could buy a pair of pants for 99 cents. On my day, my brother Pete and I were shopping at, there was a duck in the washroom before heading home. After washing our hands, we found there was no paper towel. However, there was a hand dryer. This was new to us. I pushed a button and whoosh, water came out. We dried our hand, but then became corundum. How are we supposed to turn the machine off? I pushed the button, but the hand dryer kept going. I tried to push the button again, so holy Christ, I said to Pete, and broke the machine. We didn't know it would shut off automatically if you left it alone. Scared, we ran down the stairs and out of the store thinking that we broke the machine.
Okay, still have, okay. Thank you.
But, so I'll go old school. So I want to echo what you said, Sharon. Thank you to Ada, Pat, and Sophie, and all the organizers, and thank you for all of you here showing up on Mother's Day and taking time out of this beautiful sunshine to be here to support us. It means a lot to us. Thank you. So, my lucky thing is I wrote a children's book, and it only being 24 pages, I can actually just read the story in my time. So I'm going to do that. Sharon, can you do me a favor? Can you hold the mic for me? Thanks. So this is called The Little Girl. This book is dedicated to my parents, whose sacrifice, resilience, and love have been my guiding light and continue to be my inspiration. Thank you. This is great, thank you. Yeah, the little girl held on tight to her mother's hand as they crossed the busy airport. Together, they walked up to the desk. "This is my daughter's name," Mother said as she passed the refugee papers to the man behind the desk. The man looked at the paper and frowned. Can you see? Yeah. Fabulous.
I'll do it.
That's awesome, thank you. "This name is too long. There's no space on the line. We'll cross this word out," he said busily and hurried them along. In the big room past the man's desk, people hurried in all different directions. The little girl hid behind her mother as a woman with gentle, smiling eyes came towards them. A tall, strong-looking man walked beside her. "Hello. We're Tom and Mary," the woman said. "We're here to take you to our home, your new home. Welcome to Canada." The little girl sat in the back seat and looked out the window as the car drove away from the airport. She had never seen such beautiful sights. The leaves glowed like fire on the trees, and there were so many trees. That night, and for many nights after, the little girl and her parents slept, ate, and got to know Mary and Tom. Their gentle smiles made the little girl feel safe, and their warm home became her sanctuary. So I would ask the students, what time of year do you think that would be? One day, Mother said, "You have to go to school. You have to be good and work hard. Don't cause trouble." So the little girl went to school with Mary and Mother. The little girl didn't dare leave her mother's side in the very busy and strange place. She looked around. The room had so many colors and strange pictures. There were toys and pillows and tables and chairs. The little girl thought she was in a dream. Everything looked so clean and colorful. "Hello," said a tall woman with curly golden hair and green eyes. She smiled at the little girl. "Here's your desk. You can sit here." The little girl sat down and watched the other children come into the room. One by one, they happily sat down at their desks too. This is the best service ever.
Hope I'm doing a good job.
You are. Thank you. The next day, the little girl went to school and sat down in her seat, just as the teacher told her to do. She was going to be a good girl, just like Mother said. "Amanda, here. Derek, here. Stephen, here." Then the tall woman stopped. She looked at her paper, then at the little girl, and then at her paper again. "What is this?" the tall woman asked. "There are too many vowels here. This isn't a proper name. It's not even a word." She walked over to the little girl. "Your name is going to be Helen now." She smiled and went back to calling all the names on her paper. The little girl sat at her desk. In the afternoons at school, the little girl loved to play. She played with the paints, she played with the puzzles, and she played with dolls in the little house made of wood. Sometimes the other children would play with her toys, but she didn't mind. At lunchtimes, the little girl liked to walk into the forest behind the school, but she had to get past the children who shouted at her and teased at her. "Look, it's Mount St. Helens," they would. "She's going to erupt." They would yell and laugh and run back and forth in front of her. But the little girl didn't mind. She was being a good girl, just like Mother said. Many days went by. The little girl painted, drew, and listened to the woman speak at the front of the classroom. But her favorite thing to do in school was to look at the pictures in the books. She would spend many days at school looking at the same book and pretended she was in the story. Sometimes the tall woman would sit beside her and read the words that went with the pictures. One warm day, as the sun shone bright outside, Mother came in to talk to the tall woman. "I'm really worried about Helen," the woman said. "She doesn't say a word. I don't think she understands anything we are doing." The little girl's mother held the little girl by the shoulders and looked at her in the face. "You have to try harder. You're making trouble for the teachers. You cannot make trouble." So every day, the little girl tried to listen harder. She tried to print neater. She tried to paint nicer. She worked hard to learn her numbers and letters, but still, she did not speak. On another cold, windy day, the tall woman said to the little girl's mother, "There must be something wrong with her. She can't talk." The little girl's mother looked very sad, and the little girl felt scared. Please say something. They are not happy," Mother said. The little girl felt her stomach tighten. She made a fist with her hands, and she closed her eyes hard. She didn't want to, but she made her lips part. She opened her eyes and looked at the tall woman with the green eyes. My name is Hieu. Thank you so much to Sharon and Pat for that. And that really is the spirit. We are so collaborative and we're here to help each other. But so I wrote that story about, I guess, 8-9 years ago now. And it was part of a lesson that I had with students at the school. I was a teacher librarian at that time. And the question that we were talking about, or the lesson we were learning, was about the name of our school. And the name was an English name, and it was Sir blah, 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 right? Some really amazing conqueror name, English name. And so one thing led to the other, and students would just say, well, that's so normal, of course. You have to change your name. You have to have an English name. I have an English name. My mom and dad said if I don't have an English name, the teachers won't like us, and then we'll all fail in school. And so, and then one boy kind of broke my heart. He said, you know, my family, my grandmother doesn't even know how to say my English name. So there's this tearing that I saw when he was trying to explain that. He really didn't know what his name was. And so that night I couldn't sleep. It made me really think. And so I wanted to share with these students my story. So this book is actually a true story. It is my story. So I think my time is up. Thank you.
So are we now into the second 10 minutes? Yeah. So we want the first time when our mutual friend Hieu introduced me to Sharon, Hieu said she's written her father's stories. I thought you might be interested. So indeed I was. So Sharon sent me a couple of copies to share with ACWW folks and so on. I read it and I said, oh, this is so good, we have to do something about it. Because I'm always wanting people to document their own family stories, having done something myself. And when Sharon, you talked about your father had a stroke, and how precious you think the time it is when you want to bring this book to him, when he is able to enjoy that, right? So I referred to my guilt earlier on. You could imagine being a new immigrant, being a career woman, and then I was starting a family. I really had nothing for myself, no time at all. And meanwhile, my mother has wonderfully written her own memoir that we should have helped her write. Now, some of you might not even know, because of the war, she never went to school. But her father is highly educated. My mother's got good ears. He's a great storyteller. He's not just telling stories, he's reading from the classics and telling her poems that she remembers very well, even to today. And so she has been trained that way, the old oral tradition. So that's why her telling story, her style is very engaging. So when she's writing, that is when she decided nobody would have time for me. But this story is too good not to share. The story is sad, but it is something important to share. So she started using the exercise books from schools that we left at home. So she wrote one version as if she's telling the story verbally. And so she never went to school. She would say something, take a breath, comma, take a breath, comma. So the whole thing is just comma, comma, comma at the end of each sentence. At the very end, a circle. That's the Chinese full stop. So that's my job, to turn it into chapters and so on, right? But I try my best to preserve her authentic voice because I think it's so important not to do violence to her writing. I want to respect that. And you know, even though sometimes it seems to be vernacular, it's also very literary, and at times it is almost verging on the poetic. Because she's such a sensitive soul, and she's very sensitive to language. How did she learn how to write? Well, she loves Cantonese opera. And a lot of Cantonese opera is based on very beautiful poetry, right? And so she learned a lot of her language that way, and she was reading the lyric books, listening to the opera. That's how she learned. And so she really put us to shame when she was able to write her own story for us. There were different versions, as she would call it each time, but while she was struggling with the writing, she was reopening old wounds. So that's something that we have to remember when we go to our elders and say, tell me, I'm going to write your story. Just be very mindful. You're inviting them to reopen their old wounds. So my poor father was saying, those nights when she's working on her book, it was terrible. She would be in such dark moods, I would just get away from her. And once the book is out, and she found it actually resonated with a lot of people, because we've got people around the world sending in their feedback in different languages to her. And when every time we translate or just read it in Chinese to her, she would be so satisfied. So she found peace that way. So I think it's so important we really, before our elders are no longer with us, value their presence, value their memories, respect their memories. I did not think she would be so accurate. I did a lot of work searching and checking, including when she claimed that when she was in Guangxi province, and all the servant girls would climb downstairs from the roof into the next building, which is a theater, where Cantonese opera would be played every night. And I said, Cantonese opera in Guangxi province? She said, yeah, it's very popular. So I had no way I could verify that. I did not know anyone from Guangxi province. But at work, one time, there was a delegation from Guangxi province education department. Perfect. I offered to take them to lunch. So over lunch I said, tell me, do people speak Cantonese at all or understand Cantonese, even though they would have their local dialects there? Oh yeah, depends where they are. If they live along the Saigon, the West River, that comes from all the way from the mountain down Guangxi to Guangdong to South China Sea. Yes, because all the Cantonese troops, they would be traveling in these red boats, right? They are itinerant performers. They would go to all the villages along the river. And that's how they would spread it to Guangxi. So I checked everything, including when she claimed the year they walked back to China. That was the coldest winter. She remembered it was winter. So I went on the internet, it's simple. I checked. I was able to locate the actual year, and it was a very cold winter. Now, if I still have time, Cindy, 3 minutes, great. I do want to read it. This book, even though it was so somber, not attractive, right? It has something that's very uplifting. My little girl at that time, of course, she would not be able to read Chinese, and so she said, but I do want to contribute. Can I do the proofreading in English? I said, of course. She did that. And when I took her to meet with the rest of the team doing the book, the designer was hired to do the book. He saw some of the drawings my daughter brought along just to show him, because he's an artist. So I said, bring your drawing. I didn't think about asking her to do illustration. Well, the artist was so taken by her drawings, he said, you know what, I'm going to pull my original cover. You get her to draw the family running away from the bombs. And after that, he said, well, this is so good. I love it. Can you illustrate the chapters? For every chapter you read, you come up with a little sketch. So that's what she did. And, well, I see I still have time, so 2 minutes, that's Now, this is particularly for Sharon. So when I never really bothered about selling the book because we did not have time to go to all the bookstores to persuade them. And so whenever friends ask us to talk, or I would be invited to talk to the Faculty Women's Club or Rotary Club, and he said, do you have a theme? I said, yeah, I can think of a theme that relates to what you want to hear. So then I will bring up the book, and people will buy them. And we have been turning everything that we collect to support girls' education, because we really believe in educating girls. Because when the women are educated, they are not going to be pushed around. My mother is a strong woman, very intelligent and independent. My father's culture, my father came from a culture where men rule. But he respected my mother so much, he would tell the villagers, oh, just leave her alone. The first time he brought her back to the village in Fujian province, and she found out all the women were not allowed to be at the table for dinner. They prepare the food, then they disappear. She said, I'm not going to sit at the table until all my sisters are at the table. That's my mother. And it's because she has power, because she thinks independently, she learns how to read and write. She has a voice. So I took a lot of inspiration from her. My mother is now 92 years old, and she cannot come back to Canada. It's just too fragile, and the journey is too long. So I told her about ACWW honoring her book and all that, so she's very pleased. She said, well, you know, if you have something very important that you feel people should know, you should not shut up. But I'm going to shut up.
Go back to one of the themes of this afternoon's talk, and that was resilience. And I did look up a quick Google search, my great research delving tool. So resilience came up as the ability to recover from setbacks, adapt well to change, and to keep going in the face of adversity. So my father, Roy, hustled a lot of odd jobs, trying to add a few pennies to the meager family finances. And one of the stories I wanted to read to you was during the war when he was in the internment camp, working for an orchard man picking apples. And the orchard owner was J.G. Robinson. So it starts off, I wrote Mr. Kotchke, a German orchard man, asking about work for the summer of 1945. He wrote back that he had no facilities to house me. He forwarded the letter to Mr. J.G. Robinson. People advised me not to work for him because he was a hard taskmaster. I accepted the position regardless. I asked him if he could also hire my brother, Peter. J.G. asked if he was as good a worker as he had heard I was. Yes, I told him, better than me. I actually enjoyed working for him. There was always work to be done. Even on my days off, he would check to see if I wanted to help with other tasks. I regret that I never gave Peter a day off in the summer. Sunday was his only day off, but I usually worked. We could have gone to Kelowna to explore, but we never did. While working for JG, Peter and I picked over 300 boxes of apples in one day. At 8 cents a box, we made a total of $24. That's where I taught others to work around the sun. If you follow the shade while you're picking apples, you don't sweat. You follow the shade all the way around those huge trees. All the money that Peter and I made went to help support the family. That summer, we earned $500. This was 1945, just at the end of the war. Although we didn't know it then, it would be enough for a down payment on our future home at 296 Pape Avenue in Toronto. We bought it for $5,500 in 1946. I worked until mid-September, but Peter went back to start school in the beginning of September. The money was sewn into Peter's front shirt pocket. I told Peter not to take off his shirt and to shower with his shirt on. My mother was surprised we had earned so much and that I had sewn it into Peter's pocket. And I think the chapter shows the resilience, that he would push and push, and that piecework being paid just by the number of boxes he picked, he pushed himself and pushed himself to make sure that it made, so that he could earn as much as he could possibly do. And I think it's that resilience that carried him forth through the war and on into later life. And just a short story to end. One of the chapters in the book, a side hustle he also had, was delivering the Vancouver Daily Province back just in 1942. He delivered the Vancouver Daily Province and had one of the biggest paper routes in the city, and you could tell that by the stack of papers he picked up every day to deliver. And interestingly enough, Winnie and I were interviewed by a journalist, and an article appeared in the province just this past week about LiterASIAN and highlighted some of our stories in it. And the photo of my father and I that's been used in the LiterASIAN promotional material also appeared in the newspaper. And I can't think of a better 96th birthday present. When I go back, my father's birthday is on Wednesday. We're leaving tomorrow. We would get back in time for his 96th birthday. I bought copies of the Vancouver Province, and we're going to present that to him as a birthday present.
Thank you. I don't know how to follow these two amazing people. But I do want to pick up on a few themes that I've been hearing. And it was interesting, Winnie, you said it, and Sharon, you had mentioned too, with the path, the last reading. A lot of the stories that we often hear, and a discussion that we have as educators when we present books to children and young children and the general public, is this theme of always being positive, right? And I had this conversation with the teacher consultant that is on the team, and I said, why do all this, like, she said, oh, we can't have stories that are sad because it's so victimizing. And I said, wait a minute, if they're real stories, they're stories to be heard. And what you had said when you resonated with me, when you said it was a sad story and it took a lot for your mom to write it, and it was probably difficult, and for your father to read the way he read on the screen, like, it takes a lot, and but then at the same time it's cathartic, right? To have your story out there. And so I think that myth of having things always positive only shows one dimension, right? We are all such complex individuals, and it's difficult to even in stories capture that complexity. And so when we do get a story that is authentic, that is written with honesty, that's what we take in, and we learn from the resistance and the resilience that goes into that. The other theme I wanted to pick up was family. Both of you wrote the voices of your father and your mother and your parents, and in my book, one of the main characters is my mother. And the story for our family is that we are part of the boat people, that exodus, the big exodus from Vietnam in 1980, we literally left in the night and escaped Vietnam, and we met up with pirates who, stole and hurt, and it was difficult to watch and witness, and that was the trauma that I was witness to at the age of 7, right? And then we landed at the Song La refugee camp in Thailand, and we lived there for 10 months. And the reason why we lived there for such a short time, because 10 months is a very, very short time, is because my father was a Navy captain, and he worked with the Americans and the Allies. And so when word came out that we were fleeing, my family, my father actually had many offers from France, from Australia, from Canada, and from the United States. And he chose Canada because he said, Canada is so nice. It's filled with just nice people that even the animals are so nice. They're not poisonous. Who worked alongside Navy SEALs, and then in Canada, he was a laborer. He just tried to find labor jobs, like sweeping up floors and cleaning up in the night. And my mother was a biology prof in Vietnam, and she came over and she was a dishwasher. And our first few days were very, very hard. My dad had a bike, and my mom would sit at the front, and I would sit on the handlebars, and he would ride us every morning, rain or shine, and he would take me to school that way, and he would take my mom to her dishwashing job, and then he would go to his job. And I would think, and I remember I was so embarrassed of my family. I was so embarrassed. I wish I came from somewhere else, and I would go to school, and all these wonderful, beautiful looking children would be, coming up with cars and toys and Barbie dolls and G.I. Joe figurines, and their biggest thing was like, oh, I didn't want that same jam and peanut butter sandwich. And then here I was, embarrassingly being dropped off on a bicycle, right? And we were so dirt poor. But it really, the intersectionality of poverty, of displacement, of family, of language, of identity, comes boiling down to a simple word, my name. And so,
That was really artfully done. And I want to pick up something from what you said to make this a real conversation. So you talk about the meeting the privates, just whatever you have. And I've heard stories about that from a lot of the refugees, especially those traveled by boat. One of the reasons why we had to turn to illustrations, because when the publisher asked me to find a photo of my mother when she was a child, we could not. The book ended with them arriving on the shore of Hong Kong with nothing, because on that last journey, pirates robbed them of everything, stripped them of everything. So they had nothing. And yet I want to end on a good note. So we didn't have any pictures of Mom when she was a child. The first photo she took in the studio when she's 18, that's on that side. So that helped me imagine what she might be like when she's a child. And then on the other side, that's when she's 18 years old. And that kind of like bookended for me. But can you imagine the woman, the child who had been deprived of her father, 2 sisters, livelihood, everything. Became an orphan, and with the widow, my grandmother, arriving in Hong Kong with nothing. And they were so thirsty, and she talked about it in the book. I have no time to read from it, and so you can read it yourself. This is another thing about her. She's using her stories to tell us to be kind. Every act of kindness is so important, no matter how small it is. So there was a hawker selling tea for maybe a penny a bowl. They had been in the little boat for night and day. And so they were so thirsty, they had nothing. So my grandmother begged the hawker, can you give us one bowl to share with the three of us? And that person gave them a bowl of plain tea. And she said, I will always remember that. It's like hot 是一滴如甘露. Now this is what she said. That's a poem, right? Poetic saying. When you are thirsty, one drop of water is like dew from heaven. So I really appreciate how you use those words and condense everything to talk about helping ordinary, lucky people understand when people have been displaced, when they've gone through a lot of trauma. There's much more than just having your name changed to make a compromise to get along, right?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And I think going full circle to what I started this second part of my conversation is there's that question about should this shaped who I am today, and I'm sitting here. I have my dream job and a beautiful family, and my son is going to make me a Mother's Day dinner. And I have this beautiful life, but I also have this insight that I would never have had. And we can pay it forward. We can pay it forward when we listen to the lessons that are in front of us, and take it in. And there is beauty and gratitude and generosity. And I honestly feel that I feel so grateful to be part of this, to be honest with you, because not only are we heard and seen as a group that have in the past been so ashamed to even show our face, and in the past who worked so hard to be whatever the mainstream culture wanted us to be, right? Now I can just be me, and it doesn't have to be a political statement. It unfortunately sometimes is, but one day in the future, and for my son, it won't be. It will just be we are humans, and we can care for each other, and we can take care of each other, and we can take care of this earth together. So I'd like to end on that.